She died not once, but 3 times. And yet, what changed her life forever wasn't what she saw during those moments. It was what she discovered after returning. Phyllis Atwater had no intention of becoming one of the world's leading experts on near-death experiences. Her life was ordinary until a series of medical emergencies pulled her across the veil and back again. During those brief moments outside of time, she witnessed something that would forever shift her understanding of life, death, and what lies beyond. But what makes her story so compelling isn't just her personal experience, it's what she learned after. Atwater dedicated over a decade to researching thousands of NDE cases from all walks of life. What she found was astonishing. Regardless of culture, age, or belief, people described strikingly similar afterlife experiences. Light, peace, love, and sometimes a mission. This video explores the revelations of a woman who saw death, returned with questions, and spent the rest of her life uncovering answers. What did she find, and why do so many people describe the same mysterious journey to the other side? Of all the people who have reported near-death experiences, Phyllis Atwater stands out not just because she lived through one, but because she survived 3. Before those life-altering moments, she lived what many would call a typical life. She was a writer and businesswoman, grounded in the material world and not particularly spiritual. But in 1977, a series of medical emergencies changed everything. It began with a severe reaction to an experimental medication. Her body collapsed and her heart stopped. That was her first death. The second occurred shortly after, when her system crashed again under strain. The third came weeks later, when she slipped once more into full clinical death. Each episode was medically documented. Each time her brainwaves flatlined, each time doctors prepared for the worst. And yet, she returned. What happened during those 3 experiences defies simple explanation. Atwater described floating above her body, witnessing conversations between doctors, and experiencing a realm of pure light. She encountered what she called beings of knowledge, felt an overwhelming sense of love, and was told her life had a purpose still to fulfill. She reported traveling through tunnels, hearing music without sound, and receiving knowledge that was later confirmed by real-life events. But perhaps the most unusual part of her case was how consistent these experiences were. Each death brought her back to a place she felt she had already visited. And each time she came back with the same conviction: you have work to do. After her third near-death experience, Atwater found that she was no longer the same person. Her personality had changed. She developed unusual cognitive abilities and intuitive perceptions. It was as if the boundary between worlds had been permanently shifted. At first, she tried to return to normal life, but the experience wouldn't let her go. She needed to understand what had happened, and whether others had seen what she had seen. In 1978, just 1 year after her final NDE, she began collecting stories from people who had also crossed over and returned. What started as a personal search turned into a full-scale scientific investigation. For the next several decades, Atwater conducted one of the most extensive studies on near-death experiences ever attempted. She gathered over 4,000 first-hand accounts, spanning cultures, religions, and backgrounds. She looked for patterns, anomalies, and common truths. She interviewed children, soldiers, skeptics, scientists. She analyzed language, emotional responses, neurological data, and what she discovered would reshape not just her own worldview, but the world's understanding of death itself. Her books, Coming Back to Life, Beyond the Light, and The Big Book of Near-Death Experiences, are now considered essential reading in the field. They are cited by doctors, psychologists, and spiritual leaders alike. Atwater's work is unique not only because she experienced death multiple times, but because she chose to turn that trauma into decades of disciplined inquiry. Her contribution has brought credibility and clarity to a subject once dismissed as fantasy. So what exactly did she uncover in those thousands of stories? Why do people across time and space describe the same visions, the same feelings, the same other side? And how do these experiences change the way we live now? As her research deepened, one message kept returning to the surface: powerful, consistent, and impossible to ignore. The next part of her story may change everything you believe about life after death. What lies beyond the final breath? For decades, Phyllis Atwater searched for the answer, not in theory, but in the lived experiences of thousands who had crossed the threshold of death and returned. What she discovered was not a chaotic collection of hallucinations, but a consistent, structured, and deeply emotional landscape described by people of every background, age, religion, and culture. Over and over, the same images, the same sensations, the same truths appeared. And it was this astonishing repetition that led Atwater to a groundbreaking conclusion. What these people saw wasn't fantasy. It was something real. The first and most universal element was the tunnel, a long, often dark passage leading toward a radiant light. Nearly every experiencer described the sensation of traveling through this tunnel, often accompanied by a sense of movement, speed, or being pulled. At the end of the tunnel, they encounter a light, not just bright, but warm, intelligent, and somehow alive. This light was often perceived as divine, though rarely defined by religious labels. Some called it God, others a presence, others simply home. What united their accounts was the overwhelming feeling of unconditional love, a kind of total acceptance that most said they had never experienced on Earth. Many described being met by deceased relatives, parents, spouses, children, who welcomed them and offered comfort. Others encountered spiritual beings or guides, often described as cloaked in light or appearing in forms too abstract for words. Strikingly, children as young as 4 reported seeing these figures, using language they had never heard before. One child described a man in glowing robes who told her, "You still have things to learn." She later identified the figure from an old photo of her grandfather, whom she had never met in life. Another common element was the life review, a panoramic, 360-degree playback of one's entire life. But this wasn't just memory. It was emotional. People relived their actions through the feelings of others. One man recalled stealing money as a teenager, and during his life review felt the heartbreak of the friend he had betrayed. Others described moments of kindness that had seemed small at the time, but were magnified in meaning on the other side. These reviews weren't punitive, Atwater found. They weren't judgmental. They were enlightening, as if the soul was being gently shown how everything connects. There were also descriptions of limitless knowledge. People said they knew everything for a moment, understood how the universe works, why things happen, and where they came from. And yet, upon return, that vast knowledge faded, leaving only fragments and impressions. Many called it the Great Forgetting. But the impact remained. People returned changed, emotionally, spiritually, and often physically. Atwater documented case after case of individuals who were blind but described visual scenes, deaf people who heard voices, even a comatose patient who described the shoes a nurse wore during his resuscitation. And it wasn't just the events, they spoke of the feeling, a sensation of peace so profound, so overwhelming that they no longer feared death. It was more real than life. Many said. That phrase echoed in Atwater's notes thousands of times. What fascinated her most was that these patterns did not depend on belief. Atheists had them. Children too young for religious training had them. People from every continent and every tradition described the same tunnel, the same light, the same sensation of leaving their bodies and being welcomed. These weren't dreams or drug-induced visions. They occurred when the brain was non-functional, when clinical death was declared. And still, the same story unfolded. Atwater compiled over 40 recurring elements that appeared in NDEs, many of which were experienced identically across age groups and cultures. She believed this was not coincidence or cultural programming. This was evidence of a shared, universal experience. These similarities, she wrote, are not imagination. They are glimpses of a reality deeper than the one we wake up in each day. And so the question becomes not whether these experiences are real, but what they are trying to tell us. What happens after someone dies and comes back? According to Phyllis Atwater, the answer isn't just about what they saw. It's about how they live afterward. Time and again, she found that people who experienced a near-death episode returned with a deep and lasting transformation. These weren't minor changes. Many left their careers, walked away from marriages, moved across the country, or dedicated their lives to helping others. They often reported that their values had flipped upside down. Material success no longer mattered. What mattered was love, connection, and meaning. Atwater was especially interested in these changes and began documenting the long-term effects of NDEs in hundreds of cases. She discovered a striking set of recurring traits among survivors. One of the most common was a profound loss of the fear of death. People who had once been terrified of dying came back with total peace about it. For many, this wasn't just a belief, it was a knowing. They had seen what came next. They no longer speculated. They remembered. Another recurring shift was a powerful sense of mission, a feeling that they had returned for a reason, often one they couldn't immediately name but felt compelled to pursue. Survivors frequently developed heightened intuition, sometimes to the point of experiencing precognitive dreams or sudden telepathic impressions. Some even reported physical changes, increased sensitivity to light and sound, or new electrical interference with devices like watches and electronics. These effects were so consistent that Atwater began to wonder whether something fundamental was happening to the human body and brain during an NDE. Scientists took notice. Over the past decades, neurologists and psychologists have conducted studies to understand what happens in the brain during clinical death. One of the most famous studies, conducted by Dr. Sam Parnia and his team, found that in some patients who had flatlined, no heartbeat, no measurable brain activity, there were still conscious experiences. Patients could describe what was said in the room, who was present, and what actions were taken during resuscitation. Some even described visuals from outside their own body. In theory, the brain shouldn't be able to form or retain memories during these moments. And yet, it happened. These findings have fueled growing scientific curiosity about consciousness and its relationship to the brain. Is the brain simply a receiver, like a radio, for something more fundamental? Could consciousness survive death? While traditional neuroscience struggles to explain it fully, a number of researchers now admit that the near-death experience presents a challenge to materialist assumptions. Dr. Pim van Lommel, a Dutch cardiologist, famously concluded that consciousness cannot be localized to the brain alone. Atwater's research supports this. She noted that even young children, too young to have formed a cultural concept of heaven or the afterlife, often reported the same features as adults. The tunnel, the light, the presence, the life review. And more importantly, they changed too. Children who had an NDE were often more empathetic, curious, and philosophical than their peers. Some displayed advanced cognitive or artistic abilities. They seemed to carry with them something more than just a memory. They carried a message. Not all of these transformations were easy. Atwater also noted that NDE survivors often struggled to reintegrate into their old lives. Relationships sometimes broke under the weight of the changes. Friends and family didn't always understand. But still, almost no one who had an NDE wished it had never happened. Even those who had experienced trauma, even pain, said that what they saw and felt on the other side was worth it. Because afterward, everything made sense. In her analysis, Atwater came to believe that NDEs aren't just profound events for individuals. They are part of a larger pattern of human evolution. A call to wake up, a glimpse of something bigger, something we've forgotten. As she once wrote, these people don't just come back to life. They come back transformed. They carry a piece of the next world with them. And through their eyes, we begin to remember who we really are. For decades, Phyllis Atwater listened to the stories of those who had crossed the threshold of death and returned. Some described radiant beings. Others found themselves in vast landscapes of light or sound. But it wasn't just what they saw that fascinated her. It was what they learned. After interviewing thousands of experiencers and comparing their memories, Atwater came to a profound and transformative conclusion. Death is not the end. It is the beginning of a deeper form of awareness, a return to something more real than life itself. She believes we do not lose ourselves in death. We remember ourselves. We don't dissolve into nothingness. Instead, we awaken to the truth of who we have always been. In her view, physical life is a kind of training ground, a school for consciousness. Our challenges, our losses, our victories, they're not random. They're tailored to us, designed to help us grow and rediscover our greater identity. We are more than we think, she often said, and life is just the beginning. According to Atwater, many people who experience an NDE report that, after death, they feel not smaller, but larger. vaster than their physical bodies ever allowed. They speak of knowledge, clarity, and purpose far beyond anything they knew before. One of her most radical conclusions is that our souls retain individuality, but they also reconnect to something collective, a field of wisdom, love, and shared memory. Time and again, people described feeling as though they had come home. They realized that life wasn't something to endure, but something they had chosen. Many remembered details of a pre-life plan, or saw how each event in their life fit into a larger pattern. This wasn't a philosophical idea, it was experiential, vivid, undeniable for those who lived it. Atwater's research helped bridge the gap between science and spirituality. Her books are used by doctors in palliative care, by psychologists working with grief, and by clergy seeking to comfort the dying. Her message is not tied to a religion or dogma, it's universal. What matters, she says, is how we live now, with love, with presence, with awareness that there is more. She often warned against living as if we are temporary. You are not just a body, she wrote. You are a being of light, learning how to love in the physical. That shift in perspective, seeing life as an opportunity for growth, not a random string of events, can change everything. And for those who fear the end, her words bring something rare. Hope grounded in testimony. Not theory, but lived experience. Atwater's mission has never been to convince, but to share. She doesn't claim to have all the answers, but she offers one powerful insight echoed by thousands of voices, that the soul survives, learns, remembers. That what we call death is not a door closing, but one opening, a return, a remembering, a homecoming. And perhaps the greatest truth she brings us is this. If we carry the soul with us wherever we go, then maybe, just maybe, the next world isn't waiting for us. Maybe it's already here, hidden in the quiet moments, the glimpses of love, the echoes of something eternal inside us all. Do you believe in life after death? Write in the comments. Recently, some interesting videos were released on my channel. I strongly advise you to watch them. Please don't forget to like this video if you liked it. See you soon.